Ladies and gentlemen, we live in a world and a community where stress and tension and anxiety and frustration, and fear, addiction, and trauma are increasing at exponential rates. These emotions feed a negative energy field. And if this negative energy field is not addressed, it will lead to problems, chronic illnesses, additional mental health related problems. To no one's surprise, the take 2 aspirins and call me in the morning model doesn't work. In the medical community and in the healthcare community, are we treating the wrong things? That's the question we want to look at today. Are we treating the wrong things? Now, as dismal as all this sounds, there's help. It's help on the horizon. My associates and I are putting together a plan for a series of wellness clinics, and they're going to be called WEC3 Catalyst Community Wellness Centers. We, the word we, W-E, the letter C, and the number 3, WEC3. You're going to be hearing a lot about this in the coming weeks and months, and it is being put together. Now, this is going to provide an integration of complementary, energy, and alternative medicines. We're going to give people the opportunity to take control of their own wellness. So let's see what this is about. Today, my guest is Dr. Drew Factor. He's an MD, an MPH, and he's been practicing internal medicine in Sacramento, California for over 20 years. The Adverse Childhood Experience, also known as ACE study, from 2019 transformed his understanding about health. And since that point in time, he's dedicated himself to being both a student and a teacher of a more integrated approach to wellness. And this is amazing. This is a medical doctor who is understanding this movement. So Dr. Factor, welcome to Energy Healing and Integrative Wellness.
Thank you so much, Frank. It's great to be here. Yeah. I actually, before we get started, I do want to make a correction here. I learned about the adverse childhood experience in 2019, so 2 years ago. It was actually a several year study, but it was finally published in 1998. So it's been around there for over 20 years itself. Mm-hmm. And it's also been called the largest public health study that no one's ever heard of. I learned about it in 2019, and as we'll get to, it really transformed the way I saw medicine and the way I sort of shifted my practice, and it's what led me to meet you and to talk about it.
Let's go from there. We're seeing more and more medical doctors addressing this, the energy healing, the integrative wellness, where when I was a medic in the military 40 years ago, that was unthinkable. How did you get to this point?
Well, I think you're right that we're seeing more and more alternative medicine in this. I'm not sure how integrative it is, and that's what I hope something like the WEC3 Center can really do. But I'll tell you a little bit about my story. As I said, as you said, I practiced for 20 years, and I thought I was doing a very good job. Knew the study, knew the stuff. Patients liked me, they liked coming to me, I liked my work. But in 2019, a colleague of mine had seen one of his patients and said, Drew, you need to know about this. I saw her for the first time in a while. Something about her had shifted. And I asked her, this is my colleague saying, what was the difference? And she said, do you know anything about the ACE study? And of course, he said no. And she also mentioned a book I'll mention. Do you know anything about this book called The Body Keeps the Score by Dr. Bessel van der Kolk? And so Mike said to me, Drew, you need to know about this stuff because it's just, amazing. And so both of us read the study, we started reading the books, and sort of light bulbs went up. And in a nutshell, the ACE study is a huge public health study, was a huge public health study, over 17,000 patients for mostly white, mostly middle class or upper middle class people in San Diego. And what they found was the more adverse childhood experiences they had, anything from divorce to someone living with depression to someone in their family with incarceration. The more of those adverse childhood experiences they had, the more likely they were to have medical and emotional diseases. So not just depression, not just anxiety, but real diseases, as we say, heart disease, cancer, diabetes, Alzheimer's, you name it. And so what this said to me was, as I thought back and thought about it, I said, we're treating medicine, we're treating health very exercise, diet, and here's some medications. You treat heart disease or high blood pressure, the same thing, medication, but we're really missing the cause. If we're not understanding the cause of these things, we're really missing the boat. And what the ACE study showed me was that for most of this stuff, I think we're missing the underlying cause. And that really comes down to one word, and that's stress, right? When we've been exposed at a young age to a lot of stuff, some of it we're aware of, some of it we're not aware of, we develop ways of dealing with stress differently. And some of it's very subconscious. And so what I realize is there's a stress component to, or a reaction to the stress component that underlies most of these medical issues. So what happened for me was I had a different approach to working with the patient. And I kind of saw, and I think a lot of patients felt, better appreciated, better understanding. We're not just giving a pill for blood pressure, pill for diabetes. We're not that we're not doing that, but we're treating at a deeper level. And as we're treating at a deeper level, what came to me is like, well, how do we deal? Or we deal with stress with a referral to a therapist. But a lot of people who've been through therapy, as have I been through therapy, it also treats a lot of the surface stuff. And so I started to explore a lot of different ways in which we deal with stress at a more integrative, holistic, deeper level. We'll talk more about that. But so once I started learning about this, started to see things in a different way, my burnout mostly went away. My burnout and a lot of my colleagues' burnout, I believe, is because we're dealing with medicine, we're dealing with health mechanistically. And it just became rote. And when you're dealing with something with rote, you lose the emotion, you lose the passion, and you lose the true connectiveness with patients. So it really transformed not just how I saw patients, but also my connectiveness to myself, to my patients, and to understanding health and disease.
How did their patients initially react? Because they're expecting to come see a doctor. You spend anywhere from 5 to 7 minutes with them. Here, take this medication, come back and see me. Did you see a reaction difference with your patients, Dr. Factor?
Well, I have to admit, I was a newbie. No one told me what to do or how to do it. I just saw this information, said, let's take the ACE score. Let's take the ACE questionnaire. It's a 10-point questionnaire. So I would give a 1 or 2 minute introduction and say, here, take this score, take this questionnaire, and if you're okay with it, we'll talk about it afterwards. And most people were okay with doing that. And I might say, it looks like you checked off this. Do you mind if we talk a bit about it? So we got to very deeper levels fairly quickly. They may not have necessarily seen the connection between why they were answering the questionnaire and where we were going. But we started talking about things that some of them were unprepared to talk about, frankly, but some people were glad someone asked the question. I recall a man in his early 80s who checked off that he had been sexually abused when he was young. And I just asked him, I said, how does it feel to tell me about it? He said, it actually feels a relief. And I said, a relief? I said, have you talked about this with anyone before? Your wife, your chaplain, your pastor, your kids? He said, no. He'd been sitting this with for 75 years. this horror, this memory, this shame for 75 years and never gotten off his chest. So just asking the question, he was finally able to tell a little bit about his story.
Mm-hmm.
And I approached it with, obviously, just opening, questioning, compassionate ears. So just the act of listening and having people tell their stories, as you probably know from having people tell stories on your channel,
Mm-hmm.
it's a great healing process. And I think that's the first start of the healing process, even if we don't even talk about healing modalities, just being witnessed to something that happened to them when they were younger.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We're seeing more people. I've interviewed several people who have repressed this or basically pushed it completely out of their minds. And one person in particular said, I went through 18 years of therapy, 18 years, and we were dancing around it. We weren't really addressing the center point. And they met with an alternative healing model. And they said they didn't give me a medication. It's just, tell me what happened. Tell me how you felt. Tell me what it was like all those years of holding this back. What impact did it have? So this stress and withholding all this stress is leading to a number of chronic illnesses. Is that right?
Exactly. Yeah. And, most people don't even know that that's really going on because it's a protective mechanism, right? We've shut down memories. We've shut down wanting to talk about it. And some people go through life not even realizing that it's running the show a lot of the time. Folletti, Vincent, the ACEs study was, the two main authors were Vincent Folletti, who was the head of medicine at Kaiser, and Robert Anda, who was an epidemiologist at the CDC. Folletti actually showed his information. People didn't believe it. So Anda said, we got to make this a bigger study. And so the two of them teamed up. But how Dr. Folletti found out about it, he was running an obesity clinic. And like a lot of great discoveries that were done by accident, he asked a woman, instead of asking how old she was when she had her first sexual encounter, he asked how much she weighed during her first sexual encounter. And she said, I was 40 pounds and it was my dad.
Oh my God.
And what he learned was there's a strong connection between obesity and morbid obesity and sexual assault, sexual, abuse. And, when I see a patient in my office or I see someone walking down the street, I realize there's tremendous trauma that's underneath them, that they're holding back, that they may or may not have at the surface. And so if I had that knowledge, I can sort of help them understand themselves, right? Most physicians, and I was one of them, said, well, if you're obese, you're probably not eating well enough and you're not exercising well enough, end of story. And I didn't realize that there was this third prong. This third prong is stress, not to mention shame, right?
Yes.
When someone wants to protect themselves from other sexual advances, they eat and they become overweight and they become less sexually attractive to other people. It's a protective mechanism. So all these things are protective mechanisms. And so when I talk to patients about the protective mechanisms of the body, the spirit, the emotions, it's not so much shame that they feel. They say, oh, that's why I did that. That's why I did that. And once they start knowing the underlying roots of what happened to them, then they can kind of step back and see themselves much more objectively instead of the own shame that they put on themselves and start the healing process. I had one patient, actually it wasn't even my patient. It was a patient who was a colleague of mine. This is just a few months ago, who said, Dr. Factor, my PCP is out of the office. My primary care physician's out of the office. I just need a pain medication refill. That's all I need. And I said, sure, no problem. Why do you have pain? She said, well, I'm morbidly obese, I have a lot of swelling in my legs, and that's the only thing that takes care of my pain in my legs. And I said to her, I said, I don't know if this is true for you, but I've seen this in a lot of patients. A lot of people with morbid obesity have had sometime in their past some sort of sexual trauma. Does that resonate with you at all?
Mm-hmm.
And she said, yeah, Dr. Factor, when I was 15, and she told her story.
Wow.
She'd never told her story to anyone before. And at the end of the visit, which was just to get a pain medication, but because I know this information, I know how to ask it, I know to ask it, and I don't ask everyone, right? But she said, why didn't anyone tell me this ever before? This is a revelation for me, So she got an understanding of herself that I knew only because I know the data. That's all it is. I know the data. And so once people start understanding themselves, they're on a different path to healing, I think. And that's where we come into, can I do it all? No, of course not. And so the idea of the WEC3 Center, the Wellness and Excellent Catalyst Community Centers, came out of this thinking that, number one, we can't do this alone. I can't work one-on-one with the patient and expect them to be healthy. There's no magic pill for morbid obesity because you're dealing with underlying issues. You're dealing with years of shame. You're dealing with years of habits. And there are different techniques to help regulate the immune system, the nervous system, which then can regulate the immune system, decrease stress. Cortisol is a major driver of stress. It's also a major driver of diabetes. It's also a major driver of appetite. Physicians know that you put someone on prednisone who's healthy and happy and at normal weight, and they start gaining an appetite. They start putting on pounds. They can get depressed. They can get demented. It's a perfect model for what happens to people when they're stressed. And people don't even know that they're stressed. And I'm talking about physiologic stress.
Yes.
So the idea for this WEC3 came out at, number one, we need to have to partner with physicians with different modalities that help get someone to heal. Because to say, just deal with your stress, you're going to say, well, what do I do? Number two is, putting this into a medical model is very, very difficult because the medical model works very mechanistically, I hate to say. And the third component is that doing this alone, one-on-one, as beautiful a model as that is, people need to be in groups. And the reason why we need to be in groups is because we need to we need to understand that we're not alone in this. There are other people who've gone through the same issues. And I can't be a teacher. I don't want to be the teacher of everyone. Everyone who goes through their own issues can help each other. And as the phrase says, it takes a village. I think this is sort of a village model of healing. It's not new. It's not new at all. It's thousands of, hundreds of thousands of years old, but we need to bring it back, I think, to health and wellness.
That's exactly the case. It's almost shocking to some people when I talked to them and said, this was going on before Christ. This was the model. This was the way it was. So we're going back to something that we lost track of somewhere along the way. It's very interesting. One of the things that we were putting this concept together, Dr. Factor, was we see a lot of nonprofits who do wonderful things, and they're wonderful people and they do wonderful things, but they take a patient or someone, they take them from here to here. And then, okay, now you go over to all these other different places. And the individual's not going to do that. They're not. It's too much effort, too much energy. How is this module, how is this program, the WEC3, going to be different?
Well, I have nothing against non-for-profits. And and I have nothing against, for-profits, I think that a collaborative model, a collaborative business model is what's needed, right? We don't want to be the next best thing, set up our shop and push everyone else out who's doing wonderful things out of business, right?
Yes.
We want to collaborate so that we can help each other out. So the way, we see this model is that there are physicians, there are therapists, there are alternative practitioners who both feed in their expertise to the center. And if needed, we feed people out to them to help their business. So it's a collaborative effort. The patients, the clients benefit from it. The people in the center benefit. The people who are much more adept at this than I am have a good revenue stream, and the therapists, they benefit because as healers, we need to, we're clients as well as practitioners as well. We're all in this together. So it's really a collaborative model.
And some of these modalities is based on what fits for that individual. It might be tapping or hypnosis or whatever the case may be. So it seems that this model is we're meeting the patient, the client, where they are at that point in time. Is that right?
Right, exactly. That's a difficult process, and I don't think anyone has really figured it out. I think there are a number of people who are trying to figure out what's best for any person at any one time. Does the practitioner know? Does the client know? Probably not, but there are good places to start. Understanding the effect of just sort of deep breathing, meditation. I mean, these things have been around for thousands of years and are well known in our society. There are other things such as tapping or emotional freedom technique, EFT, that are not well known. There are other things like EMDR, eye motion desensitization and repolarization by Francis Shapiro, and brain spotting. There's shamanic work. A lot of it sounds very out there. And to some degree, to the traditional physician like myself, it is out there, but I've witnessed a lot of it. I've spoken to a lot of practitioners, and I've seen sort of the healing processes within myself, and I know it works on other people.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I was just on a call just before today with a colleague of mine, Dr. Meinweiser, who who does EFT. And she was working, we were having a discussion and just talking about tapping. And so she asked a client, is there anything bothering you physically? And he said, yeah, my knee is bothering him. And within 3 minutes of doing tapping, he said, my knee is not bothering me anymore. He has chronic knee pain. Now, is the knee pain gone? I don't know, but he says it's bothering, it's gone. For now, it is. And he was just amazed at seeing how a simple technique, which is it's an energy healing technique. It uses a lot of the same points and meridians as acupuncture, which are very well known, was done over Zoom, no needles, no blood, no pain. And it's just a beautiful model for how simple these things can be.
Exactly. And as you have in the circle of influence that you have, the feedback from the different modalities, the practitioners' different modalities has been extraordinarily positive, hasn't it?
Yes. I mean, like in a typical business model, you think like, I don't want you guys to come. Because I've got my own business, right? We all need our own slice of the pie. No, this is actually bringing, like, most of the practitioners I've spoken to say, this is a great idea. I love it. Whether they need to or want to work within this model, they think it's a great model for healing in general and for the community, whether you're a practitioner or a client.
Mhm.
So I've really been, I wouldn't say surprised, but just really supported by the fact that people haven't heard of this idea. It's a very simple idea, and that there's been a resounding yes, we need this.
So
With
we're hearing
emphasis on the we.
very positive things from practitioners. We're also hearing very positive things from student groups or parent groups, prisons, trauma victims, people with blood pressure organizations and support groups. So the practitioners see the value, and then the people who are dealing with the stress-related issue are starting to see the value. It's someone had mentioned it to me. People are tired and they want to have more control over their own wellness. And this is something that gives them that opportunity. Is that correct?
Yeah, they're tired of being tired. I really think not a lot of people think about this, but once you start relying on a physician or a medication, you're taking away your own sovereignty. You're taking away your own power. You're taking your own way of dealing with your own health. And not that you can't rely on that, not that you don't want to, but it really brings back this idea of taking things in control and not doing it alone, right?
Mhm.
Not doing it alone, having the support, having the ability to share experiences. So, yeah.
I was a medic in the military during the Vietnam War, and I also worked with a Veterans Treatment Court, which is veterans who have committed a crime, but not a heinous crime. And the focus is on rehabilitation and not incarceration and punishment. And the groups that you mentioned were critical, and all these different modalities. I sat in on several of them with tapping. And at first they think, oh, this is crap. But they start doing it and they see other people doing it. And then they say, hey, it's working for them. And there's that system of support becomes so important.
Yeah, and I've seen a lot of these techniques, but I think, perhaps, well, I think there are two modalities. One is like not even knowing why this is there and just kind of tapping, just treating, or, but also to understanding, once people sort of understand themselves better and why they are the way they are, then the light bulb in their brain goes off, and they say, tell me more, where do I go? What do I do? And then they're hungry for this. I really feel it's our duty to bring this, information and the ability for people to have access to this, that's affordable, that's the access is there, because in the medical clinic I work, if I want to refer someone to a therapist, it can be months wait. So there's so many reasons for having a different type of modality and to have access to this. But right now I want to plug this a little bit. My daughter today is giving a talk at school, and it's a less than 10-minute talk. She was told, let me tell you 3 different topics that I can talk about. And the class decided which of the 3 topics to talk about. They chose understanding ACEs.
Wow.
So, and I was like blown away, because they get it. They get that the connection between what happened to you and this. I mean, they're not thinking about disease processes like you and I are, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
They're not, but they say, well, I don't want to get there, or who knows what they're thinking. But, understanding this and it needs to be as early as possible.
That's it. That's an incredible point. I worked with a group out of Tucson a few years ago. And one of the things that I saw, the people with Parkinson's or dementia or Alzheimer's, was the families were adamant that it's not going to happen to me, and I'm not going to let this happen to my children. What do we do? And I think the WEC3 model fits that perfectly, because it's a lifestyle, and it's a lifestyle change and alteration that's not monumentally difficult to do.
Yeah, one of probably the hardest disease processes to deal with, there are many, but dementia is there, right? Cancer, you can point to it.
Yes.
Pulmonary disease, you can point to it. Dementia is like, that person is no longer the person I married or I grew up with or whatever. And I was listening to a talk about someone who had a very different way of thinking about dementia. And I wanted to ask the question, what's the relationship between childhood trauma and dementia? And so I looked this up, and I believe it was, this was last year. I think there was a Japanese study in February of last year that looked at, don't quote me, 7,000 patients. And I just went to Google, typed in ACEs and dementia, like a high correlation between, in Japanese, between ACEs and dementia. So what can you do to decrease your risk of dementia? It's understanding trauma, understanding stress, and trying to deal with your stress. I think stress is, and a reaction to stress is the number one cause of disease processes, around the world.
That's incredible. Well, Dr. Factor, we're just about out of time. This has been an amazing conversation. I want to thank you again for coming on, letting us know that there's help is on the way. It's WEC3, W-E, the letter C, and the number 3. And this is going to allow us to take more control of our health. Now, as we finalize this offer, ladies and gentlemen, I'll be interviewing a number of practitioners in the coming weeks on different modalities, so you can see what the connection between all these modalities are and the goal of giving you control over your own wellness. If you'd like more information about Dr. Factor or the WEC3, you want to send us information, question, advice, suggestions, we have an email address which will appear at the end here. It is WEC3Wellness@gmail.com. Again, you're going to see that at the end. It'll pop up on the screen. Send us your information, send us your advice and any suggestions you may have. You can also see this broadcast on ROKU TV or on my YouTube channel, which is Frank Zaccari. And if you do watch it on YouTube, please subscribe. And let me leave you with this. None of us are in this alone. And the secret to walking on water is to know where the rocks are. And today, Dr. Factor showed us where many of those rocks are. Join me again next week, and we'll look at more energy healing and alternative wellness. Thank you again.
Thank you very much.